Call this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. The first order of business is a standard motions. The minutes dated April 17th, February 19th, January 15th, submitted for approval. They're also available for anyone to see on DVD. At this time, I'd ask for a motion.
I'll move to approve.
Been a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
A second. Any discussion, corrections, or addition to those minutes? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Minutes approved. The first item on our regular agenda today is a final plat. It's to consider a final plat for the Riverfront Estates. The site is Lot 10 of the Auditor's Plat Number 9 to the City of Dickinson, northwest quarter of Section 10, Township 139 North, Range 96 West. It's approximately 36 acres. And at this time, I'd ask the party presenting for Riverfront Estates, please come to the podium.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ryan Rudolph for Riverfront Estates. I know we've had this in front of you a few times before. I think we have everything worked out. We're looking to put 16 lots, a commercial lot, and a couple tracks in.
Any questions or comments at this time for Mr. Rudolph?
I have one, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Elkin?
Have you met with the Park Board? Have you satisfied the Park Board's need?
The Park Board has all the information they need. I believe it goes in front of the board coming up here soon. So I don't know if they've approved everything, but they have all the information they need.
Mr. Kovash?
It has not come in front of us as of yet. We did have a meeting here about a week ago and it wasn't on our agenda. So I really don't know any more than I did last meeting. We haven't discussed it. I've been in contact with James and it was my understanding that it should have really been on our board meeting last week so that we would have had it in time for this, but it wasn't. So I can't help you any more than last meeting.
Mr. Kovash, do you have any other thoughts on that as far as what direction this should go with the Park Board?
Well, you know, I guess I would like to have an answer as to if that was the thinking, the initial land that they gave us for Highlands, I believe it was. If their idea was to include that as what they would need to give us here for Riverfront as well. Was that supposed to be, because that was never discussed. I mean, when we did the Highlands edition, that's what it was for. Nothing was brought up about this.
Okay, and I'm fairly new to the company, so it was my understanding that this was originally part of Highlands and it's been replatted as Riverfront Estates. So there might be some confusion there.
You know, and that could very well be. That's why it would be nice to have it in front of us so that it could be explained to us as to if that is truly the case. If it is, you know, I can't speak for the entire Park Board. You know, if that were the case, it might be fine as it is, but I hate to make that decision based on all five of us.
Thank you, Mr. Kovash. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jackson?
I'd like to ask if you could explain what the intentions are with paving River Drive.
We intend to pave River Drive. We'd like to get these lots approved, get them going, get all the utilities across, and then at a future date, do the improvements required to River Drive. So at this time, we would do the culvert system that's shown on our civil plans, and in the future, move that into a curb and gutter system with a new paved road.
I don't know if, Mr. Chairman, we want to talk about it now or not, but I guess I have some concerns with that. You know, normally in a residential subdivision, we require the streets to be paved before the lots are developed, and I'm not really sure why this should be any different.
I
think-
agree with you, and I think we discussed that the last time, and prior to that. Mr. Kubus, do you have any thoughts on this, on what the timing is of the paving of these streets?
Well, Mr. Chairman, the applicant has come in and met with staff. The difference with this one between a lot of new subdivisions that come in is that River Drive is paved right now as a rural section, not with a curb and gutter urban section. So their intent was to move forward with developing these 15 residential lots with River Drive as it exists today, just a paved rural section road, like Mr. Rudolph said, adding culverts in for each approach into each lot. And then through the development agreement, the specific was going to be when any development occurred in Lot 16. Right now, that's just left as kind of one large tract. When that would get separated into smaller residential lots, then River Drive would be paved with curb and gutter section, similar to everything else we see in town. That was the applicant's intent. I know there's been some discussion with this commission about holding them to the curb and guttered standard, so I think that's the discussion we have in front of us right now.
Was there a timeline on that, or is that going to be left kind of open-ended, dealing with the road going by 16, Lot 16?
Right now, it was when Lot 16 was improved. There sure could be a timeline set for that. If it were 2 years, or we'd also talked the possibility of putting down some financial security to ensure that that becomes a curb and gutter section.
And the financial security was noted in this presentation we were given today. I think there should be a time, I mean, I personally think there should be a timeline that if and when those lots are developed, then it will be paved, or by a certain date, it must be, whether it's a year or two from now, or whatever, that if they never get divided, that lot never gets divided up and developed, that road's going to be paved, one way or the other at a certain time. Anybody have any other thoughts on putting the time on that?
Mr. Chairman, I do think we have to recognize that there is a paved road there. We don't have that in other situations. The financial guarantee, I think, would be important, but I think at a minimum, and when I look at it, I think it can be done. I don't know what Mr. Kubus thinks, but I think that the curb, driveways, and sidewalk could be put in on the northeasterly, or whatever direction that is, northwesterly side of that street as those 15 lots are developed. I think the road can be engineered and designed, and at least that one side put in, I think, before these lots are developed, like we would anyplace else. And then the balance perhaps could wait until 16 is developed. That way, if 16 is never developed, at least we have the one side of the street done.
And then is that road, the standards on that road, do you know, are they the same as what we would put in, that's there now? Is that to a different standard than what is in the city normally?
Sure, it's rural section, and I'm sure that's what's on the ground doesn't meet the standard that
Mhm.
that we would normally require. But again, I don't know why the side on the 15 lots can't be done. You have to be engineered right, but
Mhm. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Do you have any comments on that, Mr. Rudolph?
We'd be willing to look at doing that if it's half the road to get down the 15 lots, to get approval on this plat. It's something we'd be willing to look at, and put the other half in the development agreement for Lot 16, or a time frame to develop that other side is something we'd be willing to look at.
Mr. Rudolph, what is your time frame for developing Lot 16?
We plan on doing it in the next year or two, so a 2-year time period.
So if we put a 2-year surety bond on that for the improvements, the full improvements on the west side for 2 years, you would have no objection to that?
No.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
when you had said that you had given all the information to the Park District that was necessary, I guess what was that? Or did you have any conversations with James as to, in all likelihood here, if the land isn't sufficient, that what you gave us, it would likely be cash in lieu. Obviously, we probably wouldn't need any more land. I mean, did you have any conversations with him?
I've had a conversation with James. I've been working with Sarah.
Okay,
And I sent her all the square footage and acreage information that she was going to put into, I guess, a calculator or something that you guys have to figure out requirements of land.
okay, so I guess I'm asking, are you thinking that it's going to be a cash in lieu type thing for this development, or?
I honestly can't answer that.
Okay.
Off the top of my head, I couldn't answer that. I believe back when this was all originally done, that was the amount that was going to be dedicated, and that was an ample amount. Like I said, I'm fairly new to the company, so I can't say for certainty, but I believe when it was first put together, that was the intention, was this was going to cover both Southview First and Second Edition and this portion here, all under the Highlands umbrella.
Is it the intent to, the tract that's shown as park, is it the intent to dedicate that?
Yes.
The reason we got that, if you remember, it's unbuildable property, and so that's why we ended up with the amount that we did. And I'm not really disputing that, it's just I don't think we're very clear as to how this all came about. If this was supposed to be included in that first Highlands, I don't know. I guess none of us are sure of that, and I'm not sure how it works out as far as the actual acreage, the 7%. I don't have those figures. Apparently, you've given that to us now,
Yes.
but I haven't received any information on it.
I bring that up because that's not shown in the dedication certificate, that you're dedicating that as parkland.
Park open space lot to be reserved for public use, track 2.
Well, but it needs to be in the dedication.
Okay.
statement.
Mr. Kovash, would it, unless you have an objection for that, I mean, I don't think there's any issue with respect to the current riverfront estates, the dedication of that. The question is, was Highlands to the west or to the south part of the dedication for that? Would you have an objection, as I mentioned to you before, that prior to this going to City Commission, we'll put this in a DA, that issue has to be resolved, and we need a certificate or an approval from the Parks Board prior to this moving forward to City Commission.
I don't have a problem with that. I
Okay.
think this will be fairly easily worked out. It's just that we do need to all be on the same page as to what it's what, so I would be fine with that.
Okay. We could easily amend that and put that into the DA. The DA, the development agreement that you have attached as part of your application materials, that has to be signed before it even gets submitted to the City Commission. That's one of the requirements the City Commission has for us. Obviously, they would have to meet that condition in order to move forward, so we would modify the language accordingly. So that would address your concerns if you feel comfortable with that language.
That would be fine.
Mr. Colon, do you think that's agreeable?
Yes, Mr. President, we can proceed in that fashion.
Thank you. Mr. Rudolph, does that sound agreeable to you?
That works for us? Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions or comments at this time?
Mr. President, just one matter
Ms.
to
Cullen.
clarify, and perhaps this is from Mr. Corton, but the track 3 that's identified on there, is that the booster station?
That is correct.
Any other comments or questions at this time for Mr. Rudolph? Thank you very much. This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who'd like to make comment on this final plat. Please feel free to come to the podium and we'll hear your views. Being none, anyone else from the commission wish to make comment? Mr. Corton, would you like to make any more comments on this recommendation?
Probably to assist the commission with respect to a motion, you can make a motion to approve the Riverfront Estates, that we will amend the development agreement to address the parks, to address the park approval for the subdivision to the south, we could put prior to submittal to the city commission, the city must receive approval from the Parks Board with respect to the property to the south. And then we'll add on to the DA a 2-year financial surety for the improvements, for improvements of Lot 16, Block 1, Riverfront Estates, as included, would include curb gutters and sidewalks. And I think those address the issues that have been brought forth this morning.
Thank you, Ms. Corton. This time we'll close public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Jackson.
I'll move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the final plat for Riverfront Estates as depicted in Exhibit A and meeting all the requirements, Dickinson Municipal Code, and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare, with the contingency that park requirements are clarified and satisfied prior to going to City Commission, but also with the requirement that curbs, sidewalks, and driveways are constructed now as these lots are developed on the northwesterly side, and that a financial guarantee be taken for the balance of the construction of River Drive.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll s-
The second, any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommended approval. Thank you very much. Item 2 on our regular agenda today is a rezone petition. It's to consider a rezone petition from agricultural to general industrial. The site is generally located in the east half of the southwest quarter of Section 16, Township 140 North, Range 96 East. The site is approximately 40 acres, and at this time I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Hello, Commissioners, President. Sean Soren, Boundary Engineer, here on behalf of Dickinson Energy Park to represent this rezoning request. They are looking to change the zoning of a 40-acre piece from agricultural to general industrial. It's directly west of their Dickinson North Energy Park, which is currently general industrial as well. The property is also bordered to the north with general industrial. To the east would remain agricultural, and to the south is the new truck bypass that's being developed right now. You saw this last month, and I believe there were some questions about the development of the property. The owner has met with Mr. Josephson, addressed all those concerns. They don't have any issues with the conditions that were added to the approval in your packet. Other than that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Soren at this time? Thank you, Mr. Soren.
Yeah.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who'd like to make comment on this rezone petition. Please feel free to come to the podium. Anyone from the commission wish to make further comment? Being none, we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would ask Mr. Josephson for a recommendation.
Good morning, Steve Josephson, City County Planner. This came before you last month for rezoning, and there were some concerns raised about weed control and also dust control on the property. This is located within the ETZ, and it's been an issue where properties have been rezoned from agricultural to some other things such as industrial, and then as development has not gone forward, the lots have fallen into neglect, and then you've had the resulting problems with noxious weeds, which in a way it's one of the larger environmental issues that faces Stark County right now, and then also with dust blowing off of the property. So So I had crafted a couple of conditions. They are ones that we use at the county for similar developments. Consulted with Commissioner Elkin and also did meet with the property owner and their representative to discuss these conditions, and they have, as Mr. Soren has stated, they found them satisfactory. And the first condition is basically that the county weed officer do an inspection on the site, and if they find that there are weeds out there, that they implement a weed control plan. And that the other one is that if there's any, prior to any land disturbance on the property, that the road superintendent for the county approve a dust and erosion control plan submitted by the developer. In this case, there are references to the county because this is in the ETZ, and that's who would have responsibility for these issues. So the staff recommendation is approval subject to the conditions as they appear before you today. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
I have one question that just, I think is a fine conditions, but this is the first time I've seen it, and I've just never really thought about it, but when we get a statement in there that it says that the fire protection will be provided by Dickinson Rural Fire Department, is that implied for everybody in the county that's rural, or is that contractual?
I believe that is, Commissioner Elkin, I believe that's contractual, that those are their areas. There's certain areas within the unincorporated county that are designated to be the jurisdiction of the Dickinson Rural Fire Department. That is their responsibility. So if it's outside of city limits, and I think with a few exceptions in a good portion of Stark County, Dickinson Rural does provide fire protection. I think if you get out to different portions of it, there are some agreements elsewhere. But in this case, this is within the Dickinson Rural Fire Department's jurisdiction and service area.
And Mr. Chairman, anything outside of the city boundaries is serviced by rural fire. Even areas that have been annexed in but do not have I believe the city of Dickinson does not have the capacity to, the rural hookup, or the city hookup may not be there, is serviced by rural as well.
Just wondering about when you use the word responsibility. Responsibility is implied that the service they do provide for fire protection is what they can provide, not to a certain standard as these industries grow. The potential for a real responsible, action to take care of something significant. Can they do that? Is that necessary in this document?
To prove whether or not they can provide the service? Yeah. Well, the point is that they have to provide. They have to provide the service.
Yeah, okay.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because I'm going to have a meeting this afternoon with a couple members of the Rural Fire Department to look at potential sites for, potential sites in the ETZ, and in the county to locate new facilities. So, and I believe Chief Sivak wishes to tap me on the shoulder, and I believe he wishes to add to this discussion.
Maybe he'd like to take it all over.
Yeah.
I was sitting back there thinking, well, should we let him sink or swim? And I don't know.
Jurisdictional.
It's jurisdictional. It's not contractual as far as the responsibility to respond. Level of response, again, is related to something called the Insurance Service Office's rating schedule. Rates a fire department in the area they serve on from a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being no fire protection at all, 1 being the best fire protection that anybody can provide. So that determines the insurance rates of the area that department serves. It doesn't mean that the department has to meet one of those requirements or not. It's just that the better that the department can do, the better it is for the people that they serve. So it's not that any rural fire department has to be a certain standard, or any city fire department has to be a certain standard. But wherever you're at will impact the people you serve. Fire protection districts vary. They're not county-based. there may be several fire protection districts within one county. So,
Thank you, Mr. Seebeck. Mr. Josephson, do you have anything further to add?
No, thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Elkin?
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the Dickinson Energy Park LLC rezoning petition from Ag to General Industrial, subject to the conditions below as meeting the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Is there a second to that motion? A second? Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried, recommendation approved. Thank you, Mr. Soren. Item 3 on a regular agenda is a rezone petition. To consider a rezoning petition from low residential to community commercial, high density residential, medium density residential, and low density residential. The site is generally located in the northwest quarter of Section 33, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward. At this time I'd ask again, is there anyone here from the Prairie Creek rezoning petition would like to make comment? Mr. Croton, would you like to make, I would ask our Community Development Director to make comment on this here at this time.
Mr. Chairman, we've looked at the petition in question. The applicant should be here. It's your call if you want to move forward with the petition request without their presence. If you don't have any public comment, I would say that we've had this rezoning. We've discussed this on several occasions, so I would recommend if there's no public comment in opposition to that, to just move forward. If you turn to the zoning map, the specific request, because you've seen this several times, are along State Avenue, blocks 2 and 3. They went from R3, which they came in April, and they had that as R3, and now they're proposing to do those 2 blocks along State Avenue as community commercial. I had met with them with the excess apartments, the entitlements that we've granted over the last several years, that I think that I would be fine and comfortable with changing that from R3 to community commercial along State Avenue. We have over excess of apartments, we just need people to build them. And since that was more of a speculative venture, that I'd be comfortable with the commercial along State Avenue. So I'd be in support of it as is.
I had one question, probably for engineering. As that develops along State, is that road sufficient to, in design to take all the traffic and enough turns? And I mean, what do you see in the future for that traffic on that road there as far to handle it all?
Mr. Chairman, if I would, State Avenue north of here is proposed to be reconstructed to an urban section, and then 21st Street west of here is proposed to be rebuilt to an urban section. So we do see the traffic increasing quite a bit in this area between 21st and State Avenue, in the area in the northwest part of town. Right now, just shortly north of 15th Street, south of this plat, all the way up to 21st Street, State Avenue has, I would say, sufficient width, but it's not, or it wasn't built to an urban section. There is no curb and gutter there. So that's kind of on our list for the next biennium of projects, is to upgrade this to an urban road section as well. As a major arterial within the city of Dickinson, we feel we need to do that. Right now, we've talked with the applicant about some of their traffic flows that would be generated by this layout that you have in front of you. We feel comfortable with the traffic that'll be generated by this development, but we do see a need to upgrade State Avenue as well.
Thank you, Mr. Kubas. This traffic traffic volume study, are you familiar, you're familiar with these? That's attached to this?
Yes, this wasn't an in-depth study, but more a cursory review of the types of traffic or the amount of traffic that one would estimate that would be generated by the R1, R2, R3, and the commercial developments here, and making some estimations on where traffic would go north, south, east, and west from the development, so.
I mean, would something like this have to be redone again in a year? Does it have any value right now? Is it totally guesswork based on the projections that some business might do?
There's always some estimations, and here we're making those estimations based on land use, not even estimating businesses for the commercial portion of it.
Sure.
There are some values that are kind of standard values that you'd use for R1, R2, R3. Commercial developments can vary quite a bit, and so there are some estimations and some guesswork, as you'd say, in these types of studies. But it's kind of, at least we're looking at it right now. In the past, sometimes these have went through and traffic has become an issue without having even taken a cursory look at some of these developments, so.
Thank you, Mr. Kubas. And Mr. Cortana, I had a question for you on the basic water and sewer for this particular subdivision would be sufficient now.
That is correct. Kind of give the Planning Commission an update where this project is at. We have been discussing the project for well over probably a year and a half, and they are moving forward with their development agreement and final plat to City Commission. The DA was approved Monday night, and the final plat that you see here will be going to City Commission next meeting. And then, so that project is, the final plat's ahead of this rezone that we do have. So yes, we do have sewer and water available. Part of the projects to the north and the northwest are contingent upon using these right-of-ways and for us to install our sewer and water lines. So we would like this project obviously to move forward with respect to that.
Thank you.
And just another comment, you had mentioned about the traffic study. Engineering on that is not as precise as land use and rezoning, just to help you out on that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Cortana at this time? And I will ask one more time if by chance someone came here, anyone here from Prairie Creek? Representing Prairie Creek? And we have had the recommendation from Mr. Cortana. He feels comfortable with going ahead on this. Does anyone object? Anyone wish to make a comment on that recommendation? Being none, we'll continue then. I will ask one more time if anyone from the public would like to make comment on this rezone petition. Please feel free to come forward. Anyone from the commission? Being none, I'll close the public portion of this hearing. I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Kovash.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of Prairie Creek subdivision from low-density residential to commercial or community commercial as depicted in Exhibit A, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
A second. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend approved. Thank you, Mr. Croton. Item 4 on our regular agenda is a rezone petition. To consider a rezoning petition from agricultural to limited industrial. The site is generally located in the southeast quarter of Section 6, Township 139 North, Range 95 West. The site is approximately 63 acres. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Good morning.
Morning.
It's Kurt Martin. I guess we're asking for the rezone of 63 acres.
This time I'd ask anyone have any questions or comments for Mr. Martin.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Elkin.
Street development, Kurt. How do you plan on accessing this property?
There is access both from the east and the west onto that property.
Okay, there's a section line in there right now that,
Right, there's a section line, when you go toward the Baylor building, there's a section line that goes to the south, and it's probably about 150 to 200 feet, and then there's an easement that goes back into the property.
okay, so you have enough right-of-way for street development
Right,
on the south side of the property then? Okay.
yeah.
And Kurt, that section line on the east, that is accessible from the east? You said,
From the east, yeah, he has there's a B, when he bought the property originally from BN, that was one of the stipulations. So there is an easement alongside the interstate to that east road there, where the overpass is. It's right along here. It's just right along here. Goes all the way over. This one just comes up and goes here and goes across.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jackson.
It'll end
I wonder if we could get,
Yeah, that one follows the interstate fence all the way down.
wonder if we could get Mr. Martin to just tell us about your plans. What are you thinking about?
Well, our plans will be to ultimately, we're gonna be looking for annexation if we can in that section for sewer and water. And,
So you're thinking eventually you'd like to have city water and sewer,
right.
okay? And are you thinking you're going to subdivide it further?
You know, right now, we're looking for a new home for Martin Construction. That's our primary interest in the property. The way the property lies and when we get into, surveying and doing the mass grading, the property that's closest to the Public Works building has more of an interstate exposure. I would say the stuff on top doesn't as much. We're probably looking for the lots on top that'll pretty much will slope toward the south. Like I said, the one toward closest to the Public Works slopes toward the interstate and has more of an exposure, and we look at that may be ideal for someone to use as a commercial spot there. The one thing, on that, I'll bring it up right now, how that frontage road works there, and when the mass grading is bring into when we get the engineering and the mass grading all figured out, that frontage road is gonna be concerned with those billboard signs, because, we have the billboard signs that are right alongside the interstate fence, so that might get to be
Are you asking the city to approve more?
no, city to approve more. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I ask these questions
Yes,
because
Mr. Jackson.
I think that, it sounds like our interests and Mr. Martin's are probably going to mesh pretty well to me. I know this is outside our urban service area, but I think this would be a piece of ground that we should annex. It's got almost a mile of frontage on I-94, which I think is important to the community to make sure it looks good, that it's developed right, and I think Mr. Martin will help us do that, and especially if there's a desire for water and sewer. I really think this should be platted and annexed. Procedurally, I don't know when we do that, if we should be trying to tie that to the rezoning. I've even wondered if this shouldn't be a PUD because of the interest I think that we would have on the interstate. And maybe not necessary, I don't know. But
Well,
crosses my mind.
It's your call with respect to how you want to move that. If you want to do it as a PUD, then we need to know the land uses. Unless you just want to do a blanket one and have some, more or less look at it as an overlay district where you specify appearance issues, because you wouldn't know what the land uses are other than industrial. We wouldn't be able to condition it as we normally do on a PUD, where we have a site plan, we have their expectation, and we say you can go up, this is your maximum square footage, or these are additional requirements for compatibility sake. It is along our highway corridor or corridor overlay district. So the first 300 to 500 feet would need to fall in compliance with respect to that. So I would hope that Mr. Martin or whoever buys the property, that they would be aware of that and be in compliance with it, and not have pipe and other outside display that are going along the interstate, and actually have the buildings come up front and make that area more visible, more aesthetically pleasing, than just have it as a traditional industrial storage yard.
Does that
Yeah,
make sense
Yeah,
to
to
you?
address
Kurt?
that, Ed, that's exactly why I didn't want the first lot closest to the Public Works building. I wanted to go on top of it. As, if you go out and look at that property, when the mass grading's done, those on top are gonna slope to the south. The one closest to the Public Works building will end up sloping to the north. We're looking, you know, at a building that'll be similar to how Butler Machinery's building is, and it's pretty much gonna be sitting in front, and our, you know, equipment in our yard will be to the back. That would be the only way those places up on top can really set in those lots, those businesses. But like I said, the one closest to the Public Works building, that's gonna have a complete southern exposure. I mean, exposure looking from the north to the south, that lot will be most visible. We don't plan on using that lot for ourselves.
Mr. Chairman, Kirk, do you plan on moving your own business out there?
Well, we're under pressure to move our business out there, I'll put it that way. I would call it pressure, but we've been asked by our neighbor to sell, for they want to expand.
Just to address Commissioner Jackson's comments on the annexation, the way that we're looking at annexations would be, we would have our consultants do a sewer and water model, and if that is available, if there is excess in that area, then we would be, I would be in favor of modifying our urban service boundary. If we don't have it in the near future, which may be the case, because I know that there are water pressure issues, we are building a storage tank in that area. It may have to wait until that storage tank is built right next to the public safety building, or Public Works building.
And one thing, Ed, to add to that is, you know, looking at those properties and where you guys put the future planning for your water tower, I mean, I would be acceptable to let you move it on top of the hill, where at the same time, when you got your water up there, then you could not only, you know, have better water pressure on that side of the interstate. If you ever wanted to, you could run a line underneath the interstate, and you could get the stuff on the north side of the interstate, which I think is a big plus for all those people. And I mean, I would be willing to, you know, donate an acre or two or whatever it takes for the water tower.
John Kessel's in the back there, so I'll let you talk to him really quick.
Mr. Martin, so if you're prepared to move quickly on this, I mean, if things went in your direction, you would be prepared right away to put in your own septic and provide your water, or get water from Southwest Water to start with?
No, our first thing is we're gonna be talking to the city. If we get the chance for this, that's our second option, to drill a well and put in a drainage system there for sewer.
So, in the document here, we have that wastewater services will be provided through the use of septic systems. And we're talking in between annexation and providing water and sewer. How realistic is that, and what type of timeline do you think it would happen?
Well, the annexation side of it would come through us as a city. I'm not ready to be able to say that we do have sewer or water capacity for that. So, you know, if they came in today, if we rezoned it to industrial and they came in tomorrow and wanted to get building permits for that, at this point, they're outside our urban service area. They would have to develop it a rural, you know, it'd have to be septic and probably Southwest Water, or drill a well with respect to that. If we have the ability to expand our urban services, then at that point, in order to do that, we'd have to do the annexation. But I don't have a definitive answer for you. I don't know if Mr. Kubis can answer that at this point. We could put in there that, you know, the city would prefer to have the annexation, or you could state that the property needs to be annexed prior to a building permit, unless the city determines at the time of the building permit that that sewer and water capacity is insufficient. that would address the issue that they would be on notice, that they need to have urban services to develop the lot unless there is no way for us to do that at this point.
Mr. Kubas?
I think with respect to those services, sewer should be able to be served there, but we would need to, like Mr. Corton said, go through the capacity study and ensure that it's there. It's all higher ground than what's developed around it, so I think we wouldn't be looking at any lift stations or anything like that. From the water capacity standpoint, we know we're right on the borderline for pressure, like Mr. Corton said, with the Public Works building, and there's a booster station in that building right now to help boost that pressure. And there is a site dedicated within the Public Works plat for a tank site. Not specifically dedicated, but it's been graded out with the thought being that a water tank would go there. We're just moving into that design phase for what we're calling the east side storage tank. And I think it would be a good thing if the city is looking at annexing this property, that we include that in our study area, if nothing else, to see where the best site would be for that water tank. I think there's always some pros and cons, but I think moving that water line to a higher elevation, if nothing else, could get us by with a less expensive elevated tank. So,
I can add one comment to that.
Sure, Mr.
Not only would that be beneficial, is if you can see where that property is built up there to put that water tank, you're going to have a tremendous snow trap on that other side of that, because you have a really high ground there. And I guess we all know when the wind's coming out of the north, I mean, the street's going to be directly below it on the south side. So that could be shaved back down.
You know, Mr. Chairman, I don't know
Jackson.
how we do this exactly procedurally, but it sounds to me like we've got a willing, cooperative property owner, and I see it as an opportunity for the city to do things right along the interstate there and everything. So I don't know if the approval of this rezoning needs to somehow attach annexation, or if we do it with building permit application, or how we do that for sure, and I defer to staff on that. But there is one other thing. I know you do have access there, Kurt, along Public Works property, but there is only 33 feet there.
Right.
So probably need to get more from that adjacent property owner somehow, I would think, as this thing goes forward.
Maybe that swaps us the acre with the water tank. We'll see.
Well, there's probably a lot of ways to do that.
It's up to you as a commission to decide if you want to if you want to address the building permit on urban services or an annexation issue. We're comfortable as staff to recommend approval of it as is and negotiate and continue to work with Mr. Martin. We have been trying to determine that location for some time, so I would think that our negotiations and discussions on that would probably happen pretty quick, especially because Mr. Martin is willing to discuss that now. So obviously it'd be right for us to move forward with those discussions to figure out where that tank would be at. And if the tank is going to be outside of the boundary on his property and we negotiate that and dedicate it or whatever the land would be, then it obviously makes sense for us to annex in that property with respect to that.
Mr. Martin, are you favorable to what you've heard here? Is there anything as far as water, sewer, and accessibility to that meet your timeline? Because there may be a question there, but it sounds like you're willing to work, and the city wants to work with you on this.
Right.
Sounds like a good project, and we've known other things you've done before have been very good for the city.
No, we're going to try to work with the city as much as possible to get it to move forward.
Any other comments or questions for Mr. Martin? Anything else you'd like to add?
Nope.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thanks.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone from the public who'd like to make comment on this rezone petition. Please feel free to come forward. Anyone else from the commission wish to make comment? Mr. Josephson, I'd ask for a comment from you at this time and a recommendation.
Thank you. Steve Josephson, City County Planner. The recommendation that is in front of you is a recommendation for approval, subject to have added similar conditions similar to the case you heard earlier, because this is, for the time being, it's still in the extraterritorial zone. So one has to do with with inspection by the weed officer and a weed plan, and then dust control. Discussed this with the applicant's representative last week, and they had no objection to those conditions. One thing I do want to point out at this point in time is that this property is currently unplatted, and because it exceeds our 40 acres, they're not required to plat at this time. However, the applicant has indicated that they may be developing separate lots, especially along that frontage road that runs parallel to, to I-94. And at which point, if they did that, they would be required to go through the platting process for this, for this property. Commissioner Elkin?
How about paving?
Pardon?
How about paving?
Paving? I will check with Public Works on that. I believe that because it's in the ETZ, the roads would be required to be paved.
Well, if it's outside the city limits, we kind of follow suit of what we've done. And traditionally, if you're within a mile, we've been asking for the roads to be paved. So that would be our direction. Of course, if it was approved today, came in for a building permit, it's outside of our jurisdiction to come through your department. Your department would look at that and go, okay, you need to have it paved. So, or whatever the county standards are because of the separation now and there. So I would just make a note that you would require the roads to be paved. So
Or the other thing we could do is we could include a condition.
Anything within the ETZ.
Pardon?
The county has demanded that it be paved.
Okay.
I mean, we've done that in the past, and that's,
Okay, then it's so reflected in the record that any new roadways serving this would that would be built, would be paved.
and this is a piece of property that will be annexed into the city at some point in time. I'm assuming it will be.
Yes, and from the first meeting that I had with the applicant, they had talked about city services and the possibility of annexation. And given where it's located, by the way, this is designated as industrial on our future land use map, and the pattern for limited industrial in that area has been established. So what they're asking for is not inconsistent with existing uses and zoning out in that area, given that it's going to be adjacent to the Public Works building, which is going to be in the city, and its location. I don't think anybody really argues that annexation doesn't make sense. It's going to be a matter of whether, when we do our analysis as part of the annexation process, if the city can provide the services now or later on. So, but seeing how this is in the ETZ, for now recommend approval subject to the conditions, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Josephson?
I have none.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Any other comments from the commission? Being none, we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the Donald Gerber rezoning petition from ag to limited industrial for light industrial, subject to the conditions below, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
A second by Mr. Jackson. Any discussion? Just like to say I'm glad Mr. Elkin made the comments about the roads and the pavement, so the developer's aware of that. Even though it doesn't have to be stated, but
Well, Mr.
hope
Chairman,
he's
you have to remember
appreciative of it. Yeah.
The developer, he has asphalt and it's all laying there. It doesn't cost him anything.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed. Motion carried. Recommend approved. Thank you, Mr. Martin. This time, item 5 on our regular agenda is a special use permit. To consider a request for a special use permit for a convenient storage facility. The site is located on Lot 1, Block 1 of Tweeton's third subdivision. The site is zoned community commercial and is approximately 2.2 acres. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
I'm Mark Swenson. I'm the party representing Badlands Storage LLC. I'm a consulting engineer, and I'm serving as their project manager and design engineer. AE2S is a firm that's also involved in this project, and they're doing all of the plat-related work and survey-related. I did note that some of the there's some information missing, so I have some handouts for you to amplify.
Feel free.
This. Let's see.
Sorry, man. Apologize, man. Didn't give him, offer him coffee. Tell him, pass it on down. Okay. This is what would be called a mini storage, convenience storage facility. In December of this last year, the owners and myself met with Ed and Craig, and we detailed this project and went over the generalities on it. This type of facility is an allowable use in industrial zoned areas. It's all, and a few other zoning. It's a conditional use in CC zoning. Ed expressed to us that due just the location and the particulars of this area, that he didn't want to see this area be zoned as industrial. The description is for Tweeton Third, but the entire project encompasses land that is currently outside the city limits as well. On the first page of your attachment, the color one, you'll see a green, an orange, and a blue color. The green is the original platted property, that's Tweeton Third. And this is from the realtor prepared this map initially. Then there's two other tracts that are orange and blue. They're labeled Corte Land Tract number 1 and 2. Actually, the entire project encompasses that. All of what you see is colored in the drawing
with the exception that it does go into the Highway 22 a bit, so ignore that small technical detail. If you're, are you familiar where, I'm assuming that probably most of you are familiar where this is located. So it's across from Baker Hughes. The building that this surrounds is currently occupied by Context Energy, an energy company. It used to be a funeral home. The property, that's a big white building. The property that's around that building is predominant. It's almost entirely paved. There's a little bit of a green area on the south side. It abuts up to 29th Street. To the west of this is the Evangelical Bible Church. And you can see that on the cover there, that currently on this one there is no, you can see that it's been stripped, but they're currently under construction and well underway with their construction of their expansion of their church. And I believe they're not entirely, we've met with them, the owners met with them briefly. I'm not entirely up to speed on all what they have planned, but I believe that it's a school as well as a church, but I could be wrong on that. I can go through the narrative, but I'm assuming that you probably read it, but I can go through that certainly with any questions you have or amplify any of the text within it. This facility is, like I said, it's mini storage, but what really differentiates it from other mini storage facilities that I've been involved in quite a few. I've done probably the biggest one in the Bismarck area. What differentiates this one from the convenience storage that I've seen, and I'm not familiar with all the storage I've seen in Dickinson, is that this one is quite a bit more sophisticated. It is a single entrance gated type facility. It is well lit. It has cameras on every single aisle. As you're driving into it, it's got a card reader. It's got a full-time manager. And some of the units, about 40% is what they're planning right now, is what's called climate-controlled storage. Now, climate control is not like you would have in your house, that it's going to be 70 degrees every day, but they keep it within a range of, I believe, 60 to 85. Approximately so. So it doesn't get too cold and doesn't get too hot. Like I said, it has cameras. They do have they plan a full-time manager on the site, and they have dollies, and they are planning on having a tractor with a ball in the front to help people get in and out of the units in case they have a boat, for example. And they're very diligent on their snow removal. So the net result of this facility that I think that really separates it from other self-storage is that it's a very safe facility. But what going back to the initial meeting, something like this would typically be allowed in light industrial or limited industrial. Ed stated to us then, of course, and I understand the reasoning fully, that if this would not come to fruition or it's torn down, that this would be a poor location due to the area that you wouldn't want a typical industrial use. So with this special use permit currently ongoing in the city, there is for the Corte land, they are attempting to change that to CC. Currently it's agricultural. And well, I think I've answered quite a few of the questions, but I'm meandered around a little bit. The owner has a purchase agreement from two different owners for this, and part of it is platted and part of it isn't. What's very, very important to the owner, they're looking at a very large investment here. The land prices aren't what they used to be, of course, 20 years ago. They're looking at an investment of well over $1 million to develop this property as they'd like to propose, as they're proposing. They have purchase agreements on both, and within days the closing is going to occur. In my opinion, this is a great facility for this location. It's needed. It's in my opinion, matches up well with the surrounding properties. I think with the church to the west, they have met with the church. If I were the church, and I don't want to speak too much for them, but I think I would prefer to have a facility like this with a manager and cameras rather than a restaurant or something with a lot more traffic in this location. I think it's a good fit, but what counts is what you think. And they want to know. They are going to go through all the processes and plat this and annex it and look to change the Corday property to CC. And I've given you this information for you to look it over. This is still a bit preliminary, as long as we don't have the assurance that they can go ahead with this. So I haven't done detailed engineering on it, but we've done enough to understand that this will work in this location, and I think it's a good location. So with that, I will answer any of your questions and look forward to your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Swenson. Anyone at this time have comments or questions for Mr. Swenson? I have questions on materials that would be stored in any of the facilities. Are there limitations or certain materials that couldn't be stored? That you mentioned boats, but how about any vehicle with flammable or gasoline? Are they allowed? How does that affect the insurance and the?
There are restrictions in your own building code. I'm not a building code expert, so I'm reluctant to answer those. They do have a fairly strict agreement, and of course they don't want to store anything that's a danger to their facility or to their fellow renters. I wish I could answer that a little bit more definitively. It's my belief that, of course, their interests are aligned with the cities in that respect, that they don't want something inappropriate in the facility, of course. So,
Well, that was my question. I wanted to hear something specific about, you have the right to be more limiting than the state or the city if you so desire.
correct. And if you had thoughts on that, we'd be glad to entertain them. One thing I want to point out with this, my understanding is it's that the way that it's worded, Ed made this conditional. So I want to understand, all of you to understand that the plat has to come through and the site plan has to come through, and that all that is reviewed by the city prior to making the special use permit official. That's my understanding. So what I really want today is not a carte blanche blessing on everything, I understand that, but a blessing that, okay, we believe this is a good use, and provided you do typical and usual precautions that we agree to this use.
So you're looking for generals like, if we would like you to have trees surrounding the whole property, and that the lighting be the lighting that's provided there would only be on the property itself, not on adjoining properties.
Right.
So you wouldn't light up the sky.
Right.
Right.
I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Sure.
I didn't speak too much on landscaping. They've shown, and of course Ed's expressed this concern to me, that they want to make certain, he highlighted along Highway 22, and they do plan to landscape that area. He also, it is within your current ordinances that there not be doors facing the highway, and there is no plan to put any doors. So at least from when you're driving along Highway 22 and you look to this facility, the first building that is adjacent to the highway, which is set back about 45 feet with the current plan, does not have any doors facing the highway. And between that building and the highway, they will landscape that area. If you look in your brochure, there is some pictures of the fence they intend to use. Now that fence, initially we thought about running it along the entire length of the highway. It is a very expensive fence, and it's a very nice looking fence. Right now the plan is to have the fence off the ends of the buildings And we're open to suggestions. It probably needs to run east-west after it turns the corner. They would prefer not to run that fence all the way around the entire facility. We think that would be a bit excessive, but at least along the highway, that portion, and when you turn the corner, if it's 50 feet or 100 feet, that's not a problem. And also on 29th, they do plan to use that more decorative fence along 29th. One thing I want to, before I forget here, in the narrative of this, now this is a single source entry into this facility, and that's for security reasons, and there's a card reader and a manager at that entrance. I noticed, and my apologies for this, on the Badlands storage narrative here, page 2, proposed public right-of-way improvements. One thing that I think is great about this project is that it is an infill. They're not asking for any new streets, no new water and sewer. It is an existing street, so it will add to your tax base without adding inventory to your street system or necessary contracts for extensions. Of course, they'll need to put their own service lines into the facility. It says here on the proposed public right-of-way, with the initial plan, they were looking at just the portion along the highway. They wanted to purchase the Corte land. At the time that I submitted the special use permit, it didn't look like they were going to get that land. But it turned out that they do have a purchase agreement on it. How does that tie in with this page 2? Well, at the time they were looking at the only way to access what's on your color of this one is the green, the McMurder, would have been to extend a frontage road, which it's somewhat of a poor location of frontage road. It's not set back very far from the highway. Upon a further examination, there is a whole plethora of utilities that would make the extension of that road very difficult. Large transformers, utilities, power pole, guy wire. So I'd like to, on the narrative that I submitted with this, on page 2, they are not planning to extend that frontage road. So their sole entrance is off of 29th Street. So I want to clarify that, and my apologies for not catching that in the narrative. The traffic-wise on this, sometimes perception of these type of facilities is that they generate a lot of traffic. In fact, they don't. I have a section in the narrative that describes the traffic situation. The typical national-wide average is about 7 vehicle visits per 100. Now, I've spoken and we've studied, they've used their data from their Fargo facility. Because this has some climate control, and typically the climate control facilities have a little bit more daily traffic, their belief is that their use is actually probably going to be closer to 9. So when I put the description in here for the traffic, I made it as conservative as I could be. And I used that 9. Also, in regards to the units that you see on this, it's still preliminary. I think this building layout is actually very close to what it in fact will finally be. The only criticism that I have gotten from the owners is that they need a bit more smaller units. So although the map that came with your PDF or with your original package has 502 units, when it came to the traffic count, I used a higher number. I believe I used 600. So that unit count could go up on this layout. There's a balancing act. There's actually a study that will go on to try to determine what is the best mix. So all of these plans, there still could be changes to the lines in the buildings that show where especially at the ends of the buildings, they'll probably break some of those into smaller units. So I used what I thought was the most conservative numbers I could to come up with the traffic count. And this type of facility, unlike some others, it's typically spread out. They don't generate a lot of traffic. This use, compared to a restaurant or an office building, will be less, so I wanted to express that.
There was a comment in here about a living quarters.
Right.
Would you like to comment on that?
Right now, within the city staff report, there is a recommendation to allow one, and that is the one change that I would like to amplify a bit. Typically, the management team, the on-site managers for this facility, they don't know definitively if it's going to be a single person, but often it is a retired couple. So they have asked that one particular condition for the special use permit be amended to 2 from 1, just to allow that situation. There is a small apartment that will be right at the gate, and the intent is that those individuals will stay in that apartment.
Any questions or comments at this time for Mr. Swanson?
Couple of detailed questions, if I could.
Sure.
The southwest corner of the development, is that on Fifth Avenue or Sixth Avenue? I think it's Fifth. but-
Fifth.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then along the highway there, are you anticipating much grading overall?
Well, yes. I would anticipate down along the highway, that's getting into the engineering of it, which is, I understand. Currently, the highway ditch, because there's the highway ditch, the flow line of the ditch gets fairly close to the property line, might even get to it or even cross it slightly in a few places. I do intend to talk to the DOT, and I would anticipate down in that southwest corner probably about 4 feet, because I need to create the detention as to meet your ordinance. I need to create a pond, and that's where it all flows, is the southwest corner. Now, I've set...
Southwest corner?
Excuse me, north, I'm sorry, maybe I think I got off track. You asked about the southwest corner. It actually drains to the northeast.
Yeah.
My dyslexia kicked in here, I guess. Right, the majority of the project drains to the northwest corner, and that's where probably the biggest fill would be. Excuse me, northeast corner. But you had asked about the southwest. There is that first building off of 29th to create at least some detention. I'm going to have to put that up fairly high. But right at the corner along the church, of course, we have to match the church's property. I do look forward to meeting with the church to see what we can do to better match with their grading, see what their master plan is. But yeah, I don't anticipate a lot of grading in that corner.
I guess what I was interested in is along the highway.
Okay.
Because the highway, I think, looks to me like it's 8 or 10 feet above the adjacent ground, so you're going to be looking down. When you go
Right.
by on the highway, you're going to be looking down on the property.
I would say that right along the highway right away, at the worst case, I said 4, it might be 5 feet. I need that at least to create the detention pond there. Then there will be a pond, and as you come up from the pond, again, I don't have the detailed I don't have set finished floors yet, but I would anticipate that the finished floor of that building that's along the highway will be close to, but probably a bit below the finished surface of the adjacent highway, but not greatly so. I need to fill that area. And one of the engineering aspects of these long, narrow buildings is that they're fairly intolerant of grade. So I do need to flatten out, in effect, this site. And that means a pretty high amount of fill in that northeast corner of the site, and as where it abuts up to Tweeton Second, which is, there'll be less fill, it'll be closer. It actually is a cut down a bit there. But I do have some major electrical lines that run to the north, on the north side of the Context building property of Tweeton Second. So I can't do too much along that property, on that property line. Did I get lost and answer your, did I get to the area you were looking at? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Any other questions or comments at this time for Mr. Swenson? Mr. Swenson, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Is there any? I don't believe so, as long as, you know, I assume that you've read through the narrative, and if you have questions, you would ask them, so I won't go through each one of those. I'm sure you all have busy schedules, but there is one sign along the highway. Of course, there's a sign ordinance, and it will be within the ordinance, just want to point that out. There's no plan for a sign along 29th. If there is a signage that on 29th will more likely be affixed to the building, to a building.
Just to familiarize yourself with that, on on special use permits that are approved, we've been very specific on what signage and lighting and surface at that facility. So the sign would meet also not only the sign code or the sign ordinance, but what will be allowed in that special use area.
Sure. Is there some specific, there are limitations of the size, and what they looked at for their sign was within that. I think there is within this document, unless I'm mistaken, a picture of what they call their reader board sign. I'm just curious what, while I have your presence here, what, if there is some specific advice I can give them in regards to the sign. I think, you know, I don't work within the city of Dickinson typically, so I've got to admit that I'm a little unfamiliar with some of your procedures. I'm confident that they'll bring their sign exactly into what you're looking for. Is there any, would there be, excuse me, there is no signage in this document. If they had a reader board, would there be objection to that, which is some digital that has something on there? Would that be objectionable? Because if so, I'll tell them, and I'm certain they'll leave it off.
It may be objectionable. We'd have to.
Okay. So you're looking for, you want them to come up with a specific and.
Yeah, we would specify the sign and basically so it's not offensive to the neighbors, because
Right.
it is a special use permit.
Sure.
And that it does meet the needs of the business. I mean, it wouldn't be like you would have a sign flashing there saying,
Right.
store your toys here,
Right.
or your whatever.
They don't, I understand you don't want the sign to be too obnoxious, sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But we've done that with, over the last 20-some years, we've done that with all our special
Sure.
use permits. Signage, lighting, entrance, paving, whatever.
How would you recommend that I advise the clients on that? Do you want to give authority to an individual in your staff or on this?
I think probably it would be,
Or come back?
no, I think that would be, we would leave it up to something that our community development director would
Okay.
look at and say, this would be appropriate for this special use permit. And
I
he
think
would
that'd
give
be
us that
fine.
recommendation.
I would recommend that you add that as a condition. They wouldn't have an objection to that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Mr.
comfortable
Curtin.
with, depending on where our sign code ends up being, you know, all said and done, obviously we have our discussion afterwards. The way that our initial draft is, excluding the billboard issue, I'm comfortable the way that our sign code is written with respect to that. We do allow illuminated signs, but we do, you know, we have restrictions with respect to on-premise signs. I'm comfortable with that for this particular site. As long as you're comfortable with the current code for on-premise signs, and there's no need to have a condition on it. That would be, I normally only put conditions on it if it's something out of the ordinary that we need to address.
So there you've got an opinion.
Mr. Chairman, I
Okay.
have a question.
Mr. Elkin?
We have a number of these storage-type units as you enter the community, whether it be on number 10 from the west coming into town, or from the east coming in, or from 22 from the north coming into the city. They're not very eye-appealing. I'm just wondering, how are you going to make this different so at least it looks good?
I agree. I can tell you that they are planning to landscape, the two prime areas that you will see. But I understand metal buildings are not typically not an attractive structure. And once you're inside the facility, there's not landscaping at every corner or anything like that. But they do plan, and if you are concerned about that, they do not have an objection to you adding a condition on the landscaping side of things. You do have ordinances that already cover you do have some ordinance that do cover, they tell the size of the caliper of the tree, which is 2-inch, which is, fairly large. I think some of what you've seen on those also probably is in a light industrial zone. And I agree with you 100%. And I share the frustration. I do not live in Dickinson. I live in Bismarck. When I drive out to my house, there is a brand new facility. The city of Bismarck is not as advanced as you are in your landscape ordinance, in your corridor. Help me, Ed, here. Your corridor. Thank you. There is a brand new facility, and it's right along Highway 1804. It's 300, 400, or 500 feet long. All the doors face the road, and there's no landscaping between it and the road. They don't want to do that. I did as well on 29th. All of the facilities do not have doors. As a matter of fact, if you want to add that as a condition, I think that would be a good addition, and they wouldn't object to it. There's no plan to do that the facility not have doors facing a right-of-way. The right-of-way of Highway 22 and of 29th Street. But I agree. They do intend, I don't know how to address that specifically other than say they do attend. They have the nicest facility that I've ever been to. They run 5 or 6 different facilities, a few in Minneapolis, one or two in Fargo, and another one in West Fargo. They're typically not in those markets, and I don't know what the rental rates here are in Dickinson because, of course, out west, rental rates for apartments or things can be very distorted versus the other parts of the state or areas. Typically in Fargo, they're not the cheapest. They're not intending to be the low-cost storage. They're intended to be the highest security facility. They're typical renters, as differentiated from other facilities. Their highest percentage of renters are female. And that's because of the security that this type of facility gives them, that they can feel safe. Every single car that comes into the facility is cameraed. You're on videotape, it's taped. It's a card reader, there's a manager on site. They're typically within the facility of this size would have 1 or 2 vehicles in it at one time. It's as safe as it possibly can be for this type of facility. But they run a very attractive facility. They get a lot of positive feedback because of their facility in Fargo has rose bushes. They do intend to irrigate the portion along 29th Street. And so you're going to have, similar to the picture in your book, a landscaped area. But yeah, you're correct in the assumption that these are not real attractive at times, and they're hopeful that they change the perception. The Context Energy building adjacent to this, They want to be good neighbors, but that is somewhat of an industrial-looking building. They put, it's paved entirely around it. It has high chain link fence that with through-wire barbed wire on the top wire. There is no intent to do that. They do intend to fence the entire facility, but their chain link fence is not going to have barbed wire on the top. They will guarantee that. So.
Mr. Chairman, I could probably.
Mr. Croton.
I have condition number 1 that the facility has to be consistent to the corridor overlay district, which I'm comfortable with working with the developer on there. I've already mentioned that. The first time I seen the renderings was today, and I think probably the easiest way to address the issue would be the exterior facade that's facing 29th and Highway 22 would not show any metal appearance to it. It would be similar to what you had shown here, and I think they would be comfortable with it. I talked to them that the exterior appearance along those 2 roadways would need to be stucco, a brick facade, something of that nature, but it would not be a metal appearance to that. And that would go all the way along Highway 22 with a little wrap-in on the corners, and then also along 29th Street. 29th Street is not part of our corridor overlay district, but we could amend the condition 29 to include 29th Street. So the appearance when you come into it off of 29th or along Highway 22, you'll see an exterior treatment similar to other buildings that we would have in our commercial district. That would also include their landscaping and their fence as well. So I think that that's a fair compromise to make that work. They could come back if they wanted to, and I've seen in California when I planned there that they come back with faux windows so that it actually looks like an office building. You don't even know the difference of that. Or they could just do exterior treatments. So there's various mechanisms, there's various methods that they could use to modify it to make it look like a commercial appearance when you're driving along the road. The interior from that point on doesn't need to have any additional treatments because you're just looking at, you're within the facility itself. So I'm comfortable with that side. So if that makes you feel comfortable, that's what I've discussed with the developer. Developer would be fine with that, I presume, Mr. Swanson as well?
Yes.
So I think that would probably ease your concerns with respect to the appearance and how that is consistent with our corridor overlay district.
I guess when conceptuals all look great. You could make an
Absolutely.
outhouse look like the Taj Mahal,
Absolutely.
On paper, but it's once it's up. We have a number of storage facilities that really, they don't look good.
I would agree. I would agree. And that was my concern as I talked to him from the initial side, is that this facility would have to be upgraded. This facility, in essence, would be far beyond the appearance, at least, of any existing one that we have. So this would be a premier facility if you just use the term for mini storages in the city.
Right.
Which is exactly what they're trying to accomplish and what I would recommend approval of only along this particular area. If they came in with the same box design, I told them I would not be in favor of the project because it would be inconsistent with the corridor overlay district and that would not be a use that I would want to have in that particular area unless you make that, unless you provide those additional exterior features to make it compatible.
So that would be a part of the special use permit.
Well, that's part of condition 1.
Part of the condition.
Yes, yes. You left it open-ended that it comes to approval of me, which is part of our ordinance anyway.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Kuba.
From the engineering department's perspective, to reiterate what Mr. Swenson had said earlier, there will be no public infrastructure with the development, no public streets proposed, no public water or sewer proposed, just one water sewer service to service the apartment that he spoke of earlier. I think the things we had talked about, if you look at the plat that was provided with this, or the preliminary plat, 5th Street wouldn't go through anymore. 6th Street would be the first through street going north into the undeveloped Corte property. And then the other issue that we always look at with these, drainage can be tough. Like Mr. Swenson said, these long, narrow buildings are averse to a lot of grade. And some of the apartments that we have in town now have, their garages might be similar to this, long, narrow buildings. And, if you look at page 3 of the handout, the color handout that he had given to us, trying to show how we step those buildings, a lot of times we end up with steps. If you look at the upper left-hand photo on page 3, want to try and eliminate those as much as possible. I know our fire department comes through with some awfully big trucks, and going over those steps in the parking lot sometimes can be difficult. And it's just a challenge in designing and laying out these types of facilities. So we'd want fire to take a look at that too. Obviously, they need to make the turning movements necessary, and we always look at fire turning radiuses, especially on facilities like this, when there are kind of longer, narrower corridors and no public streets, so.
Craig, you don't see any future need for Fifth Avenue West then? Ed?
Well, we had talked about it with the applicant. Right now, Fifth Avenue is only, or Fifth Street, excuse me, no, Fifth Avenue, I'm sorry,
Avenue West.
is only a couple blocks long.
Right.
It goes down to maybe 26th or 27th, and dead ends here right now and turns and goes out to the highway. It's not a through street right now. I don't think it would be detrimental to future development to the north, just so you're aware. Some of the renderings, it's maybe hard to tell if Fifth Avenue is meant to continue on or not, so just for clarification.
Where is the school going to access? Where's that access coming from?
I don't know that they have any new access right now. They have access to their building off of 6th and off of 5th, south of 29th Street.
The white area that's depicted on the aerial that you're looking at, that's where their parking lot, the school is to the west of that, and in essence, they come off of 29th. They would create just go directly in and then go to their site.
Okay.
I feel comfortable with prohibiting Fifth Avenue going to the west and having 6th to be that access point. When you really look at the aerial on the front page of that, look across the street and you see the Baker Hughes building.
Yeah.
You see where they're coming just a little bit to the north. That would be the only, probably DOT's only access point. That's where that stoplight is going to eventually be put. So if you had that as an access point in 6, I think that would be sufficient for the Cordy property whenever it comes in. I just hope that when Cordy property comes in, it comes all in at one big chunk, that we could look at it that way. Nevertheless, we're aware of these particular access points and how we should address those.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
that has always bothered me about this Cordy property is that there's been some piecemealing of it, and the piecemealing is fine if we had a little bit more of a master plan, but that's probably a conversation for another day. I hope this project gets built. I think there's demand in the area for a facility like this, and this does seem like it's going to be a step or two, at least, above what other developments we have. If you recall, when the tract that's labeled McCurder Land Company, we originally approved that with the thought there'd be a motel there. That didn't work out, I guess. I've always thought that this ground in this half mile along the highway would be that kind of development. Retail, service, that kind of thing, nothing very heavy. Even though this is going to likely be a better development, I'm really still questioning the location. We do have industrial right across the road, but it turned out pretty nice. Baker Hughes, and it's a pretty nice development. You are going to see these buildings from the highway readily. They are still middle, and I understand our overlay district what it will require along the highway, but you're still going to see the corrugated metal roofs and the rest of it. And there's no question sitting here today, I wish it was someplace else. Whether we should approve it or not, I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I'm struggling with approving it in this location.
Any other comments on this?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Alkin.
And Gene, I have to agree, only because you're looking down on this. I mean, the highway's considerably higher than than where this is going to be placed. No matter how you do this, I don't know how it's going to be aesthetically pleasing as you enter into the community. I don't know.
Well, the point is well taken with respect to you'll be seeing the metal roofs and the rest, and that is true. I'm looking at it as a use for that particular area. It's a good use. The area to the west and to the south of it is we have a lot of single family, a lot of need. People want to have their mini storage facility generally next to them for them to be able to go to that. I would feel comfortable with this facility in that location, and if they came in, the greater Cordy property came in with another one, I'd say no. We already have a huge facility in that area, and for those same reasons that you have brought forth. Normally, you want to have a mini storage facility generally where your clients are going to be. I mean, people don't go there every day, but still people want to know that it's nearby. And I felt that kind of this is a good transition in many ways, and I've seen some good projects with respect to that. So that's why I felt comfortable. But would I feel comfortable with having another one in the remaining one? No, because I think that this land use is probably eating up that area, and I would hope that nobody else would propose that. But if they did, that would be kind of my direction. I just don't think that it would be compatible. It's necessary, and we need to protect the retail and the commercial that we've looked at that area. That being said, unfortunately, the Cordy property had such an incredible advantage several years ago. Now, so much development is occurring to the west that a lot of the nicer, if you want to use the term, or at least the bigger retailer ones, are all went to the west. So the Cordy property on actually developing as a prime retail space, commercial, is slowly limiting itself, and it's by attrition, because you're only going to have one Menards, you're only going to have one Kohl's, you're only going to have so many grocery stores, and those are already to the west. So, you know, by the time that property ever develops, we may be changing our mind and saying, well, maybe it's single family because we've gotten so much commercial in the other areas. Sure, along the interstate, along 40th, we'd say that would be commercial and there'd be more strip, but instead of the vast majority of it looking at commercial, we may come back when that property develops. Who knows? It may develop in 5 years from now, and we may change our mind and say that having another use would be more appropriate, because I think that train is leading the Cordy property, and it's going to be interesting to see how it comes to play.
Any other comments? Any other questions for Mr. Swenson? Well, I have mixed feelings on it, but I think if Mr. Croton does his job as far as making this aesthetic appealing, making it totally innocuous, and in some places there's these different colored metal roofs are fashionable.
Yeah.
You go out and you build a nice cabin and you put a green metal roof on it, and it looks great. And the comments about it, the limiting of the development along there that didn't take place because of other developers, whatever their reasons were, didn't follow through. I think that is a reality of the way things are being pushed commercially to different areas. Traffic, I don't believe that traffic is a problem. I myself had a rental downtown for, 5, 6, 7 years. And most people don't even know it's a rental property. It's in what's commonly known as the Woolworth Building. And the people who did that is climate controlled, right over there. You can see it out the window. You don't even know that there's rentals in there. And did a great job in there. It's secure, safe, clean, and it serves a real purpose for people who want a place to store stuff that is climate controlled, that they don't want things freezing. I know several of the other rentals we've done, they totally prohibit any flammables. And that means if you store a boat in there, guess what? Your gas tanks are empty totally. You're not going to be working on rebuilding a motor in one inside those rentals or redoing a car in there, you know,
Right.
a fix-up thing. Those things would be totally prohibited. And they're something that the owner of the property or the rentals stipulates, even though the state or city might allow it, but the specific contracts disallow it. And maybe one owner on the property, he decides that he's going to hang up a Budweiser banner on the back of his rental for the 4th of July. You know, things like those you
Right,
can't do.
that wouldn't be allowed, of course.
I mean, those type of things. And that, Mr. Corton, I would feel would attend to on the very specifics and the way the special use permit is written up.
Right.
And Mr. Colling would agree to that.
That sounds, I believe that would be agreeable.
And that's my opinion. I'd like to hear anybody else have any comments or opinions on that.
At this, I can't definitively tell you what all the colors will be, but the plan is right now, what they've agreed upon is, the roofs are metal. They're a raised seam metal. They're not, I wouldn't call them corrugated like I grew up on a farm with the bright shiny silver or anything like that. They're dark green, and typically the darker colors are less noticeable. And the units would be a lighter tan. One of those colors, I can't really tell you if it's green or brown, but a lightish tan type of color. Would amplify what Ed said. One thing I've noted in North Dakota, I do also own storage facilities. I'm not affiliated as an owner at all in this. I'm just the design engineer. The most planning, they try to put them into light industrial areas. The data is that people want them close. People want them close to their residential area. Now, we don't know how this area to the north is going to develop. It could possibly be residential. You know, it might have been ideal for a number of different things, and like you said, the times have somewhat passed Mr. Corte by. That might have been one of the reasons why they struggled to get this purchase agreement with Mr. Corte. He's had many, many offers, of course. In a way, it's a good development, I believe, for the city of Dickinson that this developer has broken the ice, so to speak, and that hopefully this will allow that he'll be more amenable to selling off the rest of the property, and hopefully that will be a good development for the city of Dickinson. So as far as service and need to the people, it's not abutting directly up to a residential property. That's good. But it is in the vicinity, and there's, of course, a lot of apartment dwellers that are going in this area. It's going to be heavily needed for those type of people. Everybody has their toys these days, and typically, let me amplify this too. I also own, like I said, I do own storage facilities. I wouldn't, it's less than you think. You would think that a lot of the users of this would be boats and ATVs. My experience is that probably won't be the case. It'll be stuff. And you have, of course, your conditions in this city are that more people are moving in and out. It's going to be boxes of stuff. That would be the primary thing that I would anticipate. Typical users of this facility will visit their unit once a month. There's a small share, about 5% will visit it every day. Most of them is once a month. There's a good percentage that visit it once a year. So I don't think I believe there probably is already in their agreement, and I apologize, I don't have their rental agreement, that I know that they're very protective. They don't want something flammable in their units, of course. If you want to make that kind of condition or just express that to your staff, I'm almost 100% certain that they wouldn't have a problem with that. I can't say definitively because I am their consultant on this, and they would love to have been here. They wanted to be here. They had a family commitment to go to down in Arizona. So I wish I could answer that definitively on the flammable question. I don't think you need to worry, though.
Thank you, Mr. Swinton. Any other questions or comments? At this time, I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who'd like to make comment on this special use permit. Please feel free to come forward.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'm not opposed to the special use permit. As you've heard mentioned several times this morning, however, generally you'll find this type of establishment in an industrial zoned area. My concern that you are very cognizant of by the comments you've made this morning, and you've touched on most of them, my concern is its close proximity to the school and the church. I would like to see it as a condition, or at least as a matter of public record by my speaking at this meeting, that the developer of this facility be in touch with and communication with the Dickinson Fire Department to be very clear on what they should and should not be aware of when they lease to someone. As stated in their own material, clientele of cold storage includes virtually any and all business types. This type of cold storage facility is not one where we inspect each individual unit. If it isn't put out to the potential renter right at the beginning that certain things are not allowed, and especially because of the proximity to the school and the church, certain things will not be allowed, that you're going to end up with them there. You may end up with them there anyway. As a short and quick example, I want to tell you that we've recently dealt with a toxic material that we found in 2 local businesses within city limits, where the actual amount that they could safely store was 1 pound or less. With cooperation from these businesses, we've successfully removed that product from city limits. It's not necessarily just the gas in a boat. It's not necessarily just 5 gallons of gas for a lawnmower. There's all kinds of things in and around the city of Dickinson now. And when they can't be located at a business facility because we found them on a fire inspection, they may end up someplace else, someplace convenient. A rental storage unit like this that's desirable to a residential neighborhood isn't just for the residential neighborhood, however. And that's our concern. Again, I want to stress, I'm not opposed to it, but we really want to talk with the developer as this moves forward and make sure that precautions are taken. And my concern is that even with the proper precautions, right at the time of lease, there may still be things we end up with. But that's true of other places also that we simply can't control. I don't think that this has come to site plan review yet, Mr. Corton has. No. Thank you, Mr. Kubas, for bringing up some issues with fire department access, because from what I've seen with the preliminary information here, we will definitely have some issues with access. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sivak. And I think the awareness level that Mr. Sivak expressed on materials would be properly noted by Mr. Corton. I feel that, and in their private contracts with their leasers, they would also probably have that already in their writing. Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name's Bobby Williams, and I'm here representing the church and Hope Christian Academy. Appreciate all your guys' concerns. We come here really barring no, I would say, objections. We have been in contact with, I believe his name is Chuck Hendricks, the president of 5 Star Services, the parent company to Badlands Storage, and he has seemed to want to reach out and be the good neighbor. I guess our overall approach to this, or perception, is it could be something else. I mean, our adjacent properties, we have apartment buildings, we have some light commercial, we have some light industrial, where unfortunately you do see law enforcement at a few of those facilities quite often. This is a facility that could be another apartment building. Our perception again is it's secure, and that coming from the school and church's standpoint, I appreciate your guys' comments on that of safe, secure, and aesthetic. We liked the controlled entrance portion of that, and we would just ask it as this progresses further, that obviously it's already in your mind, to consider that there is a K-12 school going on under construction now and currently going there. I did hear a couple comments on the aesthetic portions of it, and I don't know if it's out of line. You guys have commented seeing metal buildings. They aren't the most attractable things all the time. The new building that we are building there at the church, we're taking great lengths of putting brick facade all the way around on all 4 sides to make it attractable. Landscaping, detention ponds, a lot of what they're saying they'll do here, but only on 2 sides. I don't know if it's out of line to have a shelled facade, continue it on all 4 sides to make it attractable from all angles of the building, not only from the highway and 29th, but from the church's side of the property and also future development to the north. Just a thought that crossed my mind as we were talking about that. And then you had mentioned our main curious question was what the plans were for Fifth. I believe the church's standpoint is we're in favor of not seeing Fifth go through there. Obviously less traffic alongside our parking lot where kids are running. Playground, our playground's going to be to the north side of the new building that we're building. So we're actually in favor of not seeing Fifth go through, to be honest with you. But the other curious question we had is there any indication of what Cordy's master plots, what's that going to look like? I've heard residential, commercial.
We can't comment on that at this time.
Okay. Those were the two main things I just wanted to bring up that we, first and foremost, I guess, aren't an objection because it could be worse, but to keep those few items in mind, please. Thank you.
We appreciate your comments, Mr. Williams. Is there anyone else in the public who would like to make comment on this special use permit? Please feel free to come forward. Mr. Swenson.
Mark Swenson. Briefly, we will get in touch with the fire department, and whatever conditions they want on that, they will, if you want to make that part of the conditions, that would be agreeable. I agree with everything that the fire marshal said. And I think that something can be worked out with the church as far as aesthetics. If along that building, along their side, they want some enhancements, I think that's something that can be worked out, yes.
Thank you. Anyone from the commission wish to make further comment?
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to...
Mr. Jackson.
Don't want to belabor it, but, we've worked hard the last 3-4 years to keep land use right and keep our gateways right. There's a reason that normally these facilities are in industrial areas, and I just would encourage us to go that direction.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Mr. Curtan, would you like to make a comment or recommendation on this special use permit this time?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With respect to the discussion this morning, I went ahead and modified some of the conditions. If you feel comfortable with that, on a recommendation of approval, you can just state that, as per the community development director's modified conditions, and I'll just talk about that. Under condition 1, at the very end, just put including 29th Street. That would address the city's corridor overlay district. And then an additional condition 5, that the developer shall provide tenants with information consistent with the International Fire Code standard approved by the fire department prior to leasing of any unit. That would mean that they would need to work with the fire chief to include the language that would be given to any of the tenants to make sure that it'd be consistent with our fire code standards, the setbacks that we do have, because we do have a school and a church to the west of that. And then I would suggest that if you make a motion for approval, that this is more of an advisory note to the applicant that prior to city commission, that the exterior appearance along the west side of the building, they'll need to improve that, work with city staff before you submit that to city commission. And then obviously we can get comments from the evangelical church and see if they're consistent with that. One thing I want the board to be aware of is that the property along the west side, if that was not part of the special use permit and it came through and it was replatted and rezoned to community commercial, there is no prohibition that the if you broke off into 4 sections, the 2 that'll be along the west side for them to erect a metal building, because it'd be outside of our corridor overlay district. So that's something just to be aware of. We can attach the condition because it is a special use permit to address the compatibility issue. But if this was sold separately, they have a nice building, but there is no prohibition for somebody to come in just to the west of where Tweeden Second, Lot 1, Block 1, where that existing building is, in between the 2 properties, for them to come in with a metal building. We have no design standards with respect to that because it's outside of our corridor overlay district. The appearance portion of that applies for the first 300 feet. Beyond that point, then the appearance does not come to play. So just be aware of that particular issue. But I think that they're willing to accommodate the church to the west, and I would hope that they would work with them, submit a revised plan before it came to City Commission. Otherwise, we could address that at the City Commission level and attach appropriate condition if you want to.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. Mr. Colon, I have a question. As far as in special use permit of this sort, is there a level of capacity that they should meet, or have you ever seen one on any of these special use permits where they would fall out of the category that they've applied for? So if they only have their capacity to 10% or 20% of storage facilities rented, does that meet the requirement? Do they only have to rent 1 unit to maintain their special use permit?
Well, Mr. Chairman, the special use permit would pertain to the construction of the buildings themselves. Under the governing regulation, they would have up to a year in which to construct the buildings pursuant to the special use permit, and then the special use permit would apply to that property regardless of whether they rented 1 unit or rented all of them.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Can a special use permit be revoked at any time?
It can be revoked if there's a violation of the conditions
Okay.
on the permit.
Any other comments? This time I'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a motion. I would ask for a motion to approve, deny, table, continue.
I'll make a motion, Mr.
Jackson.
Chairman, but it may not be the one that we all want. I'll move Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend denial of the special use permit for the convenience storage. Is not meeting all the requirements of Dickinson Municipal Code and being contrary to the interest of public health, safety, and welfare.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Been a motion by Mr. Jackson to deny, a second by Mr. Elkin. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We will recommend denial. You have the right to appeal this to the City Commission, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. At this point in time, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. This meeting will adjourn. At this time, we're going to do a work session. The commission is discussing an ordinance, and at this time, I'll open the meeting to be directed by Mr. Curtan.
Mr. Chairman, contained in your application materials, you have the revised ordinance from Newman Signs. By the time they submitted it, staff hadn't had a chance to look at it, so we just threw it in the pack of materials. I don't know if you had much of a chance. You have questions with respect to it. We could let Newman Signs kind of talk about it. My goal today is to kind of get a feel of where you want to go and then craft an ordinance, bring it to you next month, if we can, if we come to some kind of conclusion, and then have that as a public hearing, and then move forward with it in May to City Commission. But I don't feel that there's not an urgency on this. You need to take as much time as you need to address the situation that you feel comfortable with. So I'm here to get direction from you. The City Commission obviously wants your input before they make a final decision with your recommendations with respect to the proposed sign ordinance. If I could draw your attention to the three questions that, more than three questions, but basically three questions that Attorney Colling had posed at the in an email to you. I provided a summary, and I want to make sure that the commissioners that are here today that are represented their comments accurately on the table that I have provided for you. I have comments from Gene Jackson and Scott Kovash and Tom Grimm and Jason as well. Both Tom and Jason are not here today, but I think I have encapsulated what their comments are fairly well. Looking at it, the results of it, it appears that obviously as a commission that you would be in favor of billboards within our jurisdiction. That would be a change from our existing sign code, because our existing one that we are proposing, or the proposed one that prohibited that. So we'll make that note. We'll make that note and come back with a revision with that. Are you okay with billboards, and where do you want them? It appears that there is more or less a consensus on the commission that you would want them in the city limits under our commercial and industrial areas. You didn't for arterials or above, and that's something that we could discuss a little more in detail. Do you want that to be strictly on the interstates, or are you just saying our arterials throughout our city? And I want to get a clarification for that. And then, are you okay with what kind of billboards? It seems like to me there's a consensus for both digital and for static one as well. You do mention that special use permit is what you would like to address. I presume the reason for that would be compatibility issues. The industry will tell you that they only want to do two styles for that. You have every right, if you do it as a special use and you want to deal with compatibility, to revise those. And if they choose not to, then they just don't move forward with their project, if you want to do that. Or you could just say that we would allow billboards to be a certain style due to the industry standards, and if that's the case, you're not going to address compatibility issues. I would recommend that you get rid of the special use permit, and it would just be if you meet the code, you can get your permit. So that's something that we can have deliberation as well. So with that, I'll leave that open for discussion. If that's how you see things, I'll also let Attorney Colling comment as well. We could come back with crafting an ordinance. You have in front of you the comments from Newman Signs. Dakota Signs provided it at such a late juncture. No one's had a chance to take a look at it. I'll let them comment with respect to their issues on the sign code. And then we could come back with a modified ordinance if you like. So with that, I'll just kind of open it up and get a feel from you where you want to go.
This time I'd ask if anyone would like to make comment on Mr. Curtan's assessment of what we've been received so far. And first I would ask Mr. Colling if he'd like to make some comments right away.
Mr. President, Commissioners, just to follow up on Mr. Curtan's comments and give you kind of the status of where we're at. The revised sign code has passed first reading before the City Commission. After first reading, we did get some direction from the City Commission to take another look at it. and that is what you have in front of you. With our proposed revisions to the sign code, we do have comments, as Mr. Corton said, from Newman Signs and from Dakota Outdoor Advertising, and appreciate the comments from the industry as we try to craft a good ordinance here. I think, as Mr. Corton said, we're looking for direction as to what this body would recommend as far as allowing specifically billboards within our city limits or within our ETZ. The remainder of the code, proposed code, I think is mostly non-objectionable. I think it's just this one particular issue with respect to billboards within our jurisdiction that we're looking for some direction from our policymakers on. So.
Thank you, Mr. Coley. Anyone from the commission wish to make any further comments on the material we have now at hand? Or do you wish to digest some more? And my feeling is I think after today's discussion, we should look at this next month also. And I think by next month's meeting, we should be able to make a recommendation then to the city for this and do any final tweaking. I think this is extremely important, and we want to get it right. Because some of this, we won't have a chance to go back and do over. And you can come up with the worst examples that you've seen driving down the highway, and they can happen. You can have a billboard out here on the highway that the county issued a permit for, saying flashing pink all night. Adult bookstore, exit 59, whatever you want. Those things we're trying to prevent. I went outside last night, I got home from work late, 11 o'clock at night. From my house, I see nothing but stars. I don't have a bunch of light coming from all over the place, screwing up my sky. And I don't want that, and I don't think other people do too. I think this ordinance has to benefit the city of Dickinson and the county in such a way that it is not an objection to anyone. I mean anyone. And that has to benefit this city. So I think we have to get this right. And the little things in life can be very annoying, and you can't get away from them. If you got a sign blinking 24 hours a day, you can't go over and turn it off. It's there. And those things, I think we have to attend to. Tending to signs is just like attending to our parks. You design a park, put in a park, it's going to be there for 100 years. It's going to be there for a long time. And people are going to either enjoy it or be annoyed by it for their whole lives. This is important, and it gives an impression to what type of place this is and what we want it to be. If we want Las Vegas, we can go to Las Vegas. You can see the night sky, you can see it lit up for, I don't know, a long ways away. Too far. And I don't think we want that here. That's the way I look at this, and if we have to write some fine print in here about lighting, evasive lighting, what direction the light's going to go, how many watts it's going to be, what's going to happen when newer technologies come along, what are we going to do with those signs? So I think we have to be very definitive in this, and it might be some real small things, but they're the things that affect the people that live here. And that's what I think we should do, is take a few comments from each other, comments on this ordinance, comments what we've seen so far, and then come back to it in April and send it on to the City Commission in May. Or send it on in April and they'll have it in May. Any comments? Mr. Kolosh, would you like to make any comments on this at this time?
You know, nothing additional than what I submitted to Ed. I think he's got my comments accurate, and I really don't have anything additional.
Thank you. Mr. Elkin?
Mr. Chairman, I just came back from Arizona and the Phoenix, the greater Phoenix area, and they have some digital billboards, but you notice the spacing is quite distance between. The cities look clean. And I was looking for billboards all the way just because of what we're entertaining here today, but I know from my perspective, I do not want to see any billboards along number 10. That area is clean right now. I like it that way, but that's only, it's just me. Is there a need for some billboards? Probably. I'm not against some billboards within the city's jurisdiction, zoning jurisdiction. I don't know that I necessarily want to see digital billboards running along Villard within the city. I don't know that I'm for that. I'm not. I think they're a distraction. And I believe that they're a distraction, and I've heard this too when in that Phoenix area, Mesa, Phoenix, Gilbert, they consider them a distraction. That's why the spacing is quite considerable. It's not 50, it's more than 1,500 feet down there. Do we want, do we want billboards? I suppose we do. Probably, we already have some along 94 and we have some along 22. But I think that these any new billboards that are going to be erected, I believe that these sign companies need to understand that building permits within the ETZ are issued by the county. You may receive a permit to build from the city, but building permits are issued by the county, and you need to be aware of that. Spacing recommendations, I don't know. I believe on digital that it should be 1,500 feet or greater. I really do. Special use permit, yes. I think that there should be a special use permit for each sign. That's where I'm at.
Mr. Jackson, any thoughts on this?
I'm fine with digital, with whatever spacing we end up coming up with. I went out about 6 o'clock this morning and drove the interstate from 59 to 64, and just want to see what it looked like in the dark a little bit. And I really liked what I saw. It's still pretty nice looking. There's some billboards, but I liked the way it is. And Ed, you asked the question, are we okay with billboards in our zoning jurisdiction? It was a yes or no question, but I would be interested in seeing a limitation, a number limitation. I think Fargo does it. I think other communities do it. And perhaps that limitation is the number of signs, number of billboards that we have right now. Now, that doesn't mean billboards couldn't be moved around and, replaced with digital and that kind of thing. And I realize that, as we grow, as we annex more, as we extend our extraterritorial zone, we have to recognize what that will do. But some of the detail things, the square footages and whatnot, I don't know what I'm looking at, when I look at a billboard, and I have to trust you guys to make that reasonable and yet protect the city. I think that summarizes my feelings.
And I think you hit one really good note there. As the ETZ will expand and annexations take place, we have to work close hand in hand with the county on this issue. Because what's county now could be city, and we have to have a great deal of respect for what the county also wishes in the ETZ. They're involved in the permitting. They are the permitters, and it has to be a cooperative effort, and it has to be a very supportive effort from both the city and the county perspective. And it's hard to talk about Dickinson or Stark County without they're one and the same. And I think the people who live here have the same ideals. And that's why we're living out here, because there are certain things we do like. And I support that. And I think this ordinance has to reflect that, even if it's every sign in certain areas, special use has to be approved, not blanketed for special use permits. We've done that all along. Any signs on special use permitted areas, what they want to do with their signage has always been, has to be approved with each case. And I do support that. So I think that's what we're going to do. We need time to digest this. And if there's anyone, this is not a public hearing, but if there's anyone here who would like to make a short comment, not on what we've said today, but on some additional information you have that's not in our packets, I'll give you a few minutes. If you'd like to come forward and say anything, please feel free to come forward. Let us know who you are, where you're from, and I'll give you a couple minutes each.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioners, my name is Wayne Munson with Indigo Sign Works out of Bismarck. I know today's discussion has been billboards, and obviously that's not our main business. I did send some comments after our last meeting to Ed, and I'm hoping that you guys will have the opportunity to address those as well. If you're going to write a new sign ordinance, we're part of that as well. And so, again, like I said, I know today is pretty much billboards, but I'd appreciate some consideration for some of the thoughts and concerns that I had sent earlier as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jackson.
I'd like to ask Mr. Curtin, you've gotten a lot of comments from the three companies, I think, maybe more, I don't know. Has that, have some of those comments been, or do you think will be incorporated into the ultimate ordinance? Have there been some suggestions that you like? And
Well, you have Newman Signs that provided a detailed description based in, line by line, and then I haven't had a chance really to go through Dakota's other than it looks like he addressed some of the issues, but it's more holistic in their approach. Those are the two that we received other than what we've got on the comment just a second ago. And that's dealing with the on-premise signs. So the question is, more than anything else, is obviously the industry wants to allow them within the city limits and greater access for signage and the rest. The question is, where do you really want to go? I think one issue we can bring up is, as soon as these billboards are put, they're not going to go away. That's evident, and that's true with a lot of nonconformity. So you want to be comfortable with whatever you're doing, but you could also, instead of making a call that, okay, we've got everything, you can go at a piecemeal if you wanted to. You can come in and say, all right, we want whatever, and then a year from now we revisit it. We would have limited it, and then you come back and say, it's not as bad as we thought, and then open it up more. You can always come back and revise it. It's a document, but it can be revised. So I don't know if that makes you feel any more comfortable with respect to things.
I understand there are some of those things that we just won't agree with probably, and probably won't incorporate into the ordinance. But for instance, when I look at the Newman comments, some of them are real detail things. Some of it's even wordsmithing that probably makes a difference.
And some of them I agree with, and some of them I don't.
That's all I'm asking, is if some of those things are going to be incorporated.
But it really depends on where you want to go. I mean, if you say we don't want to have them within the city limits, well, then a lot of the Newman comments are irrelevant at that point because they're addressing it throughout that area. So, what I'm getting from you, and correct me, is that, that Gina talked about potentially not allowing any additional signage. I think that's probably the first one to go from there. We have roughly 50, depending on what you look at. In the area, anywhere between 48 and 52, depending on how you classify some signs. The question is, do you want to allow additional signage for that, or just say that's our cap? And then we have specific requirements, and everybody could upgrade their signs, but you're not going to have any more than 50 signs or what our existing ones are. We'll codify that within the ordinance. I guess that's probably the first question. There's a lot of area that could be used. Looking at the summary of the North Dakota cities, 50 square feet, 50 linear feet between static signs, and then 120, 1,200 or 1,500 or whatever the case would be between digitals. There's still space that could be used for that. So really the question is, do you want to cap it, or do you want to allow additional ones for that? Or do you just want to specify certain areas and go from there? I need to know that in order to craft an ordinance, and I think that Attorney Cullen would be the same way. I'm open to doing whatever you want, but I need to know, before I come through and craft the whole ordinance, and then you say, well, we don't want to allow any additional ones. We feel 50 in the area, or whatever that total is the total that we should have. Then that changes a lot of what we would be doing when revising the code. So I think that's probably the first question. Are you comfortable with the total number that we have and allowing new ones, that new additional signs meeting our criteria and spacing requirements?
Have they submitted anything, Ed, in reference to new signs or more signage, or is it just an upgrade situation from present-day billboard to a digital billboard that they want to?
We have right now 7 and 2 additional ones. Dakota submitted 2 additional ones on Monday. That's still under our existing code. So until we have a new code, they're still vested under the existing code. Obviously, their intent is to put signs throughout the city. So, wherever you decide to deal with it. If they have intentions of putting 9 signs up and they only can get 2 with this revised code, well, it's up to them to decide if they continue on with the appeal process. They were denied 5-0 by the Board of Adjustment. They upheld my decision. So now they're going to appeal it to the City Commission. And then from there, they'll decide wherever they want to go. So yes, to answer your question, based upon this code, there's Newman signs, there's Dakota signs, there's another representative. There's a lot of people looking at this, and there's going to be a lot of permits in if we open it up. So I think that's probably pretty clear and evident. So it's your call, wherever you want to go with this.
Mr. Kovash, any comments? Well, I know I want to go to April with this. I want you to get it right. I fully supported what you're looking at, and that you'll sort it out and do what's right for Dickinson. I'm fully supportive of your attitude toward signage. And my big issue is safety and lighting, and an obnoxious view. And even our own local people are not at fault. Is there any reason to shine the lights at the football stadium over half the city? No, there's no reason to shine the light wherever. Down on the football field's fine. I mean, those type of things. There's no sense of creating annoyance for anyone living in the city. That's my biggest issue. Billboards, if they serve a purpose, whatever size they need to be, as long as they don't offend anybody, and I mean anybody.
I don't think you'll ever get a consensus on that issue.
All right. So, I mean, it's one of those things where I agree with Mr. Jackson. I come in from the west at night, and boy, it's a beautiful drive until I hit lighted up signs. It really is quite nice. And I really don't even know what's on those signs, to tell the truth. Just a bunch of glaring light. I don't know if it really serves a purpose. I doubt that it really serves a purpose to enhance Dickinson in any way, and that's my issue.
Well,
I don't think it enhances the city or the county in any way.
Right.
to promote more signage. So, I'm looking for a useful purpose for more, and right now at this point, I can't find one. And I'd like to go through this totally, everyone, and I think by April, or otherwise we suspend the sign ordinance totally and say no more signs of any kind until whatever, we come up with a recommendation next month and recommend it to the city commission for their May meeting. And that's my viewpoint on this. And I trust you, I really believe, you're doing a good job on this and you're seeing to it it's done right.
Do we want those signs moved from, would we prefer to have those signs, existing signs within the city to the ETZ? Is that what?
Well, yeah,
I don't know how many signs we want out there.
no,
That's the problem.
I don't, and I agree with you, Highway 10, there's no,
I don't want.
Highway 10, we just got, 2 years ago, we got grant for trees all the way on the corridor going north on Highway 10, didn't we? I mean, 22.
We
22.
did, but unfortunately, the contract on that one, just to give you an update on that issue.
I want to hear it.
The bids came in significantly higher, so we're modifying that whole issue. So we may not be doing that, unfortunately.
But
So,
that is an enhancement that we're looking for.
correct.
Instead of a billboard or a flashing sign, we're looking for some tree.
Right.
But, an aesthetic, something that's good for the environment.
Well, I think the illumination issue, and you bring up a good point, that's always one that's an objection one way or the other. I think we could address that issue reasonably. I mean, there's regulations that talk about candle lights and modifying them when they come into the evening from what they do during the day. I mean, that's fair. That's pretty simple to address that issue. You can't regulate the message. You could regulate the sign, though. So what they advertise, we cannot regulate. But we can regulate the position, where it's located at, and the height and size and the rest. You could regulate that issue. But I need to know kind of where you want to go. But at this point, if you want to take comments, probably be good to get some more comments from probably Newman Signs and Dakota and factor that in consideration, and we can continue to dialogue. I would refer you to the summary sheet of North Dakota city sign codes. There's no reason why you have to adopt and do the same thing that other jurisdictions do. I mean, I could pull sign codes from other areas that would be highly restrictive in the rest. So it's your call, whichever way you want to go. But you could look at that as kind of a guiding document. Stagnate signs for the most of the jurisdictions are around 500 feet between stagnant signs, which is your signs that are not digital. You have varying distances between your digital signs. Most of them are, it looks like, it appears to me to be about 1,200 square feet between the two. If you decided to allow them within the city limits or even in ETZ, those are some guidelines, those are some spacing requirements that you should factor in. Do you feel that those are sufficient? Do they need to be more stringent or less stringent? So kind of look at that as well. The height issue, they have varying heights. Fargo has a progressive height depending on how close you come up to the right-of-way. The pole height, the height is probably out of the size is definitely the most is the one that's easily can be converted, because you just modify the pole. That's the pole height. It would modify that. The base and the size of the sign, you just modify the pole. And I used to do that all the time in jurisdictions we're at. We had it as a special use permit. We had a height of 40 feet, and depending on existing structures and vegetation and other matters, you limit it to 20 or 40 feet, and all they had to do is adjust the pole height. So when they install that. But those are some issues for you to look at as part of your consideration. So I'm not getting any real direction from this point, so I don't know if Mr. Colling wants to add to that as well.
Mr. Colling, anything to add? Anything?
Well, I think one thing that we do need to point out is, as we craft the sign code, there are speech rights that companies have in order to advertise, and a prohibition upon any signage within the city is probably not going to be workable. We are going to have to provide a reasonable opportunity for companies to advertise, and some of that may include billboards and may include billboards within our city limits. We are looking at sign codes from other jurisdictions around the state as well. As Mr. Corton said, we're not required to be in conformity with those jurisdictions, but I think they do provide some guidance to us as to how other communities have dealt with the issue. As far as direction that we're getting from the commission, I think the direction that I'm hearing that you would like to go is to provide opportunity for outdoor advertising for billboards within the city limits, limited to some of our trunk line roads, limited to industrial and commercial areas, and probably have some spacing requirements with respect to residential areas. We do have some residential areas that are aligned to our trunk line roads, particularly on Highway 22. I think we would want to restrict billboard advertising within those residential jurisdictions. But from the Highway 22 or the interstate, some of our other trunk line roads, we do have commercial areas around there that may be appropriate for billboard advertising. I think that's probably the direction that we're going to look at in crafting this ordinance, and if there's objection to that, we'd certainly invite your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Colon.
Am I correct? Does Fargo limit the number of billboards?
They have approved, I quickly looked through their ordinance. They had limited along a specific corridor, maybe it was arterials, the 44, and I'm not sure where they came up with that number. They may have done something comparable to, well, they felt that they had 44 signs and they didn't feel that any more should be allowed, but they allowed the ability for those signs, instead of being classified as a non-conforming, to allow them the ability to upgrade. But probably they just factored in some distancing requirements and stated that you could have 44 signs based upon the code and capped it at that point, or some kind of reasonable one for that.
Sir, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, commission members and staff. My name is Russ Newman with Newman Outdoor Advertising, and we've been doing business in the Stark County, Dickinson area for close to 50 years, or a little bit more than 50 years, and I've been in the business for 35 years. My father started the business in Jamestown in 1955. I would like to just comment on what Mr. Curtin was saying. In Fargo, I was involved in drafting that code, and the answer to there is a limitation of 44, a cap of 44 billboards of the larger variety, the 672 square feet. So if you removed one, you could relocate it in another area, commercial or industrial area, within the city limits or the ETZ. On the smaller size, the 300 square foot, that's limited only by spacing, and I believe that's 500 feet on the same side of the road. Digital spacing is 1,200 feet between digital signs, and 500 feet between a digital and another outdoor advertising sign. It just quickly, I don't want to get into too much detail because we've provided you with plenty, and it's an arduous, detailed process writing a sign code. When we wrote the one at Fargo, we met once a month for a year and a half, and it finally got it approved. But we went through the entire code, all kinds of signs, banners, on-premise signs, billboards, neon, you name it. But what I would suggest is if we could continue communicating with the community development director and the city attorney, and maybe even have a conference call at some point in the next few weeks to just kind of, I'm sure we're not going to agree on everything, obviously, but at least so we understand where everybody's coming from, and then staff can, like you said, prepare a document and bring it back to the commission. We would prefer to know the hard and fast rules, our industry, rather than come in hat in hand on each permit for special use permit. Because there's a lot of work that goes into obtaining the site selection and landowner permission prior to getting the permit. So if we could know what the codes are, that would be helpful, beneficial to us. Does anybody have any questions?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Thank
If you have anything you'd like to send in paper again, you can send it to Mr. Corton, that'd be just fine. Give us time to look at it.
And Mr. President, if I could just
Bullen.
real briefly, Mr. Jackson had earlier asked the question about the comments that we had received from the industry, and I think there are quite a few things in the comments that both Newman and Dakota Outdoor have provided that we're going to take under pretty careful consideration, and some things that they pointed out in their comments, both on substance and just on our wordsmithing and our process, that I think we can incorporate into our ordinance. And I think I appreciate the comments they've made, and I think we're going to work with them. And I think we'd appreciate a conference call with them to discuss some of their comments in some more detail.
It's good to hear you say that, and I just like, I mean, that's the idea. This is going to be tailor-made for our community, you know, and not for Fargo or Bismarck or Las Vegas. This is for here, and it's good to hear those comments that you get very diligent with it.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that too, because I can't imagine there's not some comments there that will really help us.
Yeah.
I would expect. And, you know, the limitation thing in Fargo that Mr. Newman just described is interesting to me, you know. I would like to see some kind of limitation myself, other than just spacing and zoning and that kind of thing.
Based on Fargo, it almost appears to me we should only have 10 here.
Right. And they've probably got a few extra from West Fargo that they had before.
And I don't know how you handle that with
That
growth, you
is-
know, with further annexation and extension of ETZ. The ordinance will have to
Yeah.
somehow address that.
But I think it has to be very specific, except I still am, and this has to be specific to areas of special use permits, signage. There is one thing I think that has to be, when we go into a special use permit, in the special use permit for that particular signage, that I don't think should be, that would be take a whole lot of writing to make that very clear on that, except that it has to be approved, you know, as a special use permit when it comes up as such.
See, and I'm really wondering about that. It just seems like we could make life simpler for ourselves
Yeah.
as well as applicants
Mhm.
if we could write the ordinance well enough that
Sure.
we don't need the special use permit. But again, I'm open to hearing from you guys about that.
And Mr. President, Commissioner Jackson, I think that's something that both sign companies did point out in their comments, that they would prefer not to have a special use permit procedure, and I think I understand their reasoning on that. One of the reasons that we wrote that into our ordinance as it's proposed is because our special use permit procedure does require us to notify surrounding property owners within 300 feet of the proposed use. I think there are situations where adjoining property owners may have an interest or objection to a billboard going up on an adjacent property, and at a minimum, I think they probably deserve the right to be notified and have the opportunity to at least talk to staff or talk to policymakers, talk to elected officials about the placement of that billboard. I understand what the objection is probably going to be from the industry, but I think that's some of our reasoning of why we wanted to put that requirement in our ordinance.
And that is a process that's required by law to have those hearings, isn't it? When you
For a special use permit procedure, it is. For a sign permit, it is not. We do not require right now a special use permit for signs, either within the city or within the zoning jurisdiction.
Except, I'll make myself a little clearer. except on special use permits for other uses, the signage that's used on that special use permit for another purpose other than the zone.
Typically, it is not. We have not included signage in our special use permit. There may be a handful, one or two, where that was included as a condition.
Sure.
As a rule, it is not.
Mhm.
I'm going back in my memory now. I can't think of a special use permit we've done recently that has addressed signage of those properties. Typically, we haven't done that.
Mr. Chairman, we have not done that. There's two, there's an issue that I have dealt with in signage where, let's say an on-premise sign, you have a maximum, under our current one, you have a maximum of 200 square feet. But due to topography and due to other areas, they would like to have it at 250. There's a unique situation. The only avenue for them to go through that process would be going through a variance proceeding. Well, a variance proceeding, the criteria is very strict. And unless there's some significant disadvantage that you have due to topography and other factors, it's difficult to get that variance, to justify that variance, let's say. So sometimes you put in your sign code that if you want to increase the height above the maximum area, you do that as a special use permit. The criteria is a little laxer, but you deal with compatibility issues as well. That may be something that we consider, because we had capped on-premise signs at 200 square feet per the draft that we do have. There's certain situations, and it's so difficult because you have to apply the code across the board. That are unique issues, and normally you default to your Board of Adjustment through a variance process to address that. But in actuality, it's a very difficult one to justify to get the additional height because you are creating the problem. It was there beforehand, and so it's a difficult one to do. So you establish a criteria that you go through a special use permit to do that. That's something that I'm open for, but that would be for existing signs, not necessarily for billboards. But, the billboard side of it, if you're going to use the special use permit side, it only makes sense to me that if you're going to do that, you have additional criteria of compatibility and so forth. And then you have the ability to limit the total size of the sign, height, and the rest. If you don't want to do that and you feel that, that's not something that we want to do, then I would say we don't have it as a special use permit. You have it as a permitted by right or a ministerial permit in which you meet the requirements, you get it issued that way. That would be my suggestion. But if you want to deal with compatibility and off-site, how close it is to an adjacent business, and do you feel that would, be detrimental to the rest? And yeah, special use permit would be the proper process because you could address the compatibility issues and other ones as well. So factor that as part of your consideration.
And that takes out any arbitrary decisions.
Well, when you go from a ministerial permit to a special use permit, you're talking about compatibility. Compatibility, and you ask two people or you get two different ones. You have to base it on fact. Nevertheless, you open yourself up with potential, as been noted, you open yourself up with potential challenges because you're dealing with a broader category to address. So, those are issues that obviously legal we'd have to look at.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on that, I think if we want to do a special use permit procedure, we'd have to have very defined criteria about what the commission could consider in that special use permit because of the factor that we don't want to be arbitrary in our decisions and simply, approve billboards that we like and disapprove billboards that we don't like. There has to be a defined set of criteria that we could consider in any sort of special use permit procedure.
Is there anyone else here who would like to give us any information that we haven't gotten that you don't think? Not taking any comments on anything we've said today, but if anyone would like to make a comment or offer any more materials that we will look at over the next month that would be helpful or beneficial to our city.
Hi, my name is Bob Lewis. I'm with Dakota Outdoor in Rapid City. Just real quickly, I did point it out in the materials that I just submitted yesterday, but just for your information, there's an interesting set of cases going on in Rapid City right now that deal with a lot of the issues that may come up in front of the committee here in the next couple weeks. For instance, the Federal District Court in Rapid City and Lamar versus the City of Rapid City, Lamar Outdoor Advertising, just ruled that Rapid City's ban on digital billboards was illegal under a similar law that North Dakota has. And then they also what they're going to trial on is the spacing requirements, whether or not those are illegal under the law. And they're going to be there's 2 different lawsuits against Rapid City based on their sign ordinance, and those are going to be worth watching. We will be watching those and be keeping Mr. Colling advised as to rulings on that as things go along. But I just wanted to make you aware that even though it's South Dakota rather than North Dakota, the laws are very similar, and these issues are going to be determined by the courts very, very soon in Rapid City. So just thought I'd let you know.
Thank you.
So,
Maybe based upon that, we should hold off on the decision until that decision's finalized.
there's 2 cases and no.
Yeah, that'd be a proper procedure.
No, not at all. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, to follow up on that, Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Coleman.
Mr. Lewis and I have talked a number of times on this, and, you know, obviously court orders come out and we obey the court orders when the court finds in whatever direction that it does. We're watching those cases as well. There is a lot of litigation that goes on with respect to billboards and the regulation of those billboards. There is, I believe, a case now filed in Williston regarding outdoor advertising there too. So that's a case that's going to come down too, and we're keeping careful eye on those to see how the courts come down on those issues.
Thank you, Mr. Colling, on that. You know, and that's going to be an issue for the whole state of North Dakota, because we get our direction and what we can do from them, and we can always be more, I mean, my understanding, just about everything we do in the city, we can be more restrictive than the state. Just like the state can be more restrictive than the federal government if they so choose, in many different things. I think if we keep our eye on what's best for the city of Dickinson, I think we do have that right under our charter. And that's the process we're trying to go through. So under current law, we're trying to write a good ordinance. Is there anyone else who'd like to add any information you think might be useful for us? We'll give you a chance to make a comment. We'd like to hear it. And I think it's a consensus then that we will see this hopefully in a final form next month. We're extremely close to it. Does that sound okay, Mr. Coley? Is that going to meet?
That's fine, Mr. President. One thing that I would make you aware of, Dakota Outdoor Advertising does have, let's say it's 7 billboard applications now that did go to the Board of Adjustment. They were denied signed permits for those billboards. That has been appealed, so that billboard issue will come up, and you may see some coverage of that or information on that during April, which I don't have the date of our next planning and zoning meeting, but we may have that issue before the city commission before you have a sign code before you at your next planning and zoning meeting. So we'll take care of that on a separate procedure.
And essentially, those applications were applied before this has been finalized, so they still have a right to go through their appeal process.
Correct, they do, and we're proceeding under our existing sign code, which doesn't pertain to the new sign code, but just for your information, that issue will be coming up before the city commission.
Thank you. Mr. Corton, anything else you think we should add in this discussion? I'm counting on you, and you will hear my comments, and I don't think they're going to be a lot different than yours, but I do have some specifics that I think some of the small things are important.
So we'll just put on the agenda then at this point, continual discussion based upon that. Of course, we'll have hopefully 2 additional commissioners as well. Hopefully Mr. Grimm and Mr. Friedrich will be able to attend as well.
And I trust that their comments to you, if between now and then, via Sun Valley.
Well, I have their basic ones. Both of them were able to submit those to me that I codified and put that in your commission packets.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And this meeting is adjourned.